Hey guys, it's your average middle-aged American back again with another reaction video. This one is on Germany, a little bit different. This is Germany's massive military comeback. We don't do much military stuff on this channel. It's mostly about travel, but it is also about learning about other countries' culture. And Germany is obviously one of the places that interest us the most. For me, it may be the most interesting place to visit in Germany. I mean, in Europe. Wasn't when I started doing my research, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. And they got tons of castles and cathedrals. So that interests me a lot. Anyway, I have not seen this video, so we'll watch it together. If you're new to my channel, it's anything and everything that interests me as an average middle-aged American, mostly focused on learning about the world, other countries, other cultures. My wife and I plan to do some international traveling, going into retirement and in retirement. So we're just trying to learn as much as we can before we get on a plane. Pretty simple. All right, enough jibber jabber. Let's see what this is about. I assume that's the German army up there in the top left. And I assume those are H&K or HK rifles. You guys have any HK stuff? I have a few pieces. Being an average middle-aged American. I think that's a G. Is that a G36? Is that what you guys are using now? Let me know if you know.
Putin's actions in Ukraine have woken up a sleeping giant. Germany is making a massive military comeback that will revolutionize its armed forces to make them more of a threat than Putin ever believed they could.
Okay, I was under the impression, and I have nothing factual to back this up at all. I just thought that you guys were under some kind of a limitation on how big of an army you could build, how big of a military you could build, you know, based on the past, World War II. Am I wrong? Was that just a decision by your country just not to build up another military? You know, a major military that, you know, the likes of the top 10 military. I thought Japan was under the same umbrella, the same limitation. You know, just like certain countries can't develop nuclear weapons. I just thought that Germany and Japan were kind of limited in what they were allowed to build by agreement at the end of the war, you know, with the rest of the world. Let me know if I'm crazy. I have no idea. I'm not a historian. Just an average middle-aged American with a average college degree in business, not history. So let me know. I could be completely wrong. I guess I assumed it.
Could be. The revolution was a long time coming. For years prior to the Ukraine invasion, many commentators decried the German military, pointing out that it was far weaker than a military for a country the size and importance of Germany should maintain.
I actually did a video. No, I'm not going to interrupt it this many times, this fast, this often. Just while we're talking about it. I did another video on United States military bases in Germany. And Germans told me that their military is not acceptable. Like, I guess they're kind of anti-military, some of them, and then the other ones are almost, I don't want to say embarrassed, but they feel that the military is not up to standard. And I guess that went on the argument of pro or against United States military bases in Germany. So the people that were pro were like, yeah, we need something because our military is not strong enough, you know, and against were, you know, we don't need Americans in our country, get the hell out. So, yeah, I guess that's where all that kind of came from, was our military bases there. And I thought that was one of the reasons we had military bases there. Obviously, it's for our own advantages, but being part of NATO and all that, I assume that we were there so that the Germans wouldn't have to build up a military. Well, let me know. Go ahead. Type. It's the only way I'm going to learn. So, and I'm sure there's plenty of other people that know a lot more than me and plenty of other people that probably know less than me. So put it in the comments. Keep it civil. No name calling. It's the only way we learn. We learn from each other. More than 90% of my subscribers are actually not American. They actually live in Europe. So I guess they could be Americans living in Europe, but most of them are European. So most of the comments you see are from European people. That's how I learn. I learn directly from European people about Europe. Europeans, I should say. That's how I learn about Europe, from Europeans. All right, let's get on with it.
Spectator offered one of those negative voices. Way back in August 2019, it published an article labeling the German military as a complete joke, claiming that the country was utterly incapable of fulfilling its role as a NATO member. The argument was strong but fair. The Spectator pointed to several incidents from the time that revealed just how weak Germany's military had become. Among them was the grounding of 53.
Yeah, that's a G-36. Pretty sure. HK G-36. I'm assuming it's I think it's, yeah, should be regular NATO 5.56 by 45. Yeah, I got something similar.
3 of its Tiger helicopters, amounting to its full fleet of choppers, due to an undefined technical error. The article used that example, among others, to demonstrate that a military that was once so feared for its immense technical efficiency had degraded to the point where it couldn't even keep some of its most important equipment in the skies. There were reasons for this weakness, the Spectator pointed out. Between 1945 and 1990, the German military was somewhat constrained in its development, owing both to its actions during World War II and the subsequent dividing of the country into West and East Germany. Even now, those limitations are in effect. Per the final settlement with respect to Germany, the country's armed forces are limited to 370,000 active personnel, of which
I'm not an idiot. Sometimes I say idiotic things, but in general, I'm right more times than I'm wrong. Redemption. I feel so good now.
which no more than 345,000 can serve in its army and air force. Germany also isn't allowed to develop nuclear weapons, despite having the money and technical know-how to do so, which are all limitations that much of Europe welcomed, at least before Putin invaded Ukraine. The problem caused by these limitations placed on Germany, combined with its own lackluster approach to defense, is that Germany has spent several decades seemingly growing ever weaker on the military front. Defense Connect says that this weakness
Is that one of them 40 millimeter grenade launchers he had there? They call that a 40 Mike.
decades seemingly growing ever weaker on the military front. Defense Connect says that this weakness is a result of Germany doing very little to engage in military modernization over the last several decades. Germany's military modernization in the aftermath of the Cold War has been somewhat lackluster, the outlet claimed in 2023. This has resulted in major delays to acquisition programs, faulty equipment, costly overruns for major programs. One report published at the time highlighted the sheer scale of the issue. According to former Inspector General of the Bundeswehr Eberhard Zorn, Germany's military exhibited severe capability deficiencies in 2023. Zorn noted that only 30% of the country's helicopters supposedly available to the country's navy were actually available as of November 2022, along with just a third of its fighter jet stock, over half of its Marder infantry vehicles, and only 3 of its 6 submarines. It's all painful.
Why? You got all the money in the world. I'm pretty sure Germany is the #1 economy in Europe and one of the top 10, if not top 5 economies in the world. I get it. You're limited, a number of personnel and probably some other stuff, but why wouldn't you be at 99% capacity and completely 99% operational? There's no excuse for that other than the public's will. Now, if the public's like, don't spend our money on military, You guys have a pretty decent tax rate. So I could see it from that standpoint, but I can see both sides of it. But it's odd coming from an American who spends so much money on the military that it's insane. You know, we spend $1 trillion a year on our military. So it's hard for me to understand having 3 submarines at work. If you had to go to war and it was against the wishes of NATO, you would have a real problem. You couldn't. I mean, you just couldn't. You'd be dominated by somebody. Huh. Very interesting.
Painted a picture of a supposed powerhouse of a country that was little more than a paper tiger. Putin would have been rubbing his hands with glee when reading these types of reports. For Russia's leader, Germany's military weakness offered nothing but good news for his Ukraine invasion plans. He knew that one of his supposed greatest European military adversaries had a bark that was much worse than his bite. What would Germany be able to do to help Ukraine? Sure, it could send military aid, but given all these reports about equipment problems, surely that aid wouldn't do much to stop him from taking Ukraine. Putin didn't account for 2 things. First, he thought that Ukraine would roll over when he fully invaded in February 2022. That didn't happen. Ukraine bravely defended itself, pushing Russia out of several of the cities it occupied during the initial invasion. Since then, Ukraine's military has only grown stronger with Western support, while also revealing that Russia's military has just as many equipment-related problems as Germany's. That alone might not have been a problem. However, the second problem for Putin is that his Ukraine invasion represented a wake-up call to the rest of Europe. Germany has heeded that call more than any other nation. In the 16 months following the Ukraine invasion, Germany made several moves to demonstrate to Putin that it was paying attention to what he was doing and it was ready to respond. As The Guardian reported in the summer of 2023, Germany has already ended its reliance on Russia's oil and gas, in addition to sending plenty of weapons to Ukraine. It's also become one of Ukraine's most important financial backers, sitting second only behind the US in terms of individual countries that have donated the most money to Ukraine. More recently, Germany has been sounding the alarm bells about a potential Russian plan to attack NATO. On March 29, 2025, the UK Defence Journal reported on a joint document published by Germany's Bundeswehr and its Federal Intelligence Service. That document claimed that Russia now views the West as a systemic enemy, as demonstrated by the fact that its Navy and Air Force are being kept at high readiness, even though both have relatively little involvement in the Ukraine war compared to Russia's ground forces. The report pointed to Russia committing over 6% of its gross domestic product, or GDP, to defense in 2025, along with the country's plans to grow its armed forces to 1.5 million members as a sign of something big on the horizon. Russia may be planning for a fight with NATO. If that fight comes, Putin may be in for a rude awakening.
Let me tell you something. Listen, I love my German friends. I love my European friends. Russia couldn't handle the American citizens, let alone the American military. Look, I know that there's all kinds of stuff going on right now with tariffs and NATO and all that. Trust me. Trust me. Russia invades Poland. Russia invades France. Whatever. We're going to war. Trust me. You don't have to worry about America, whether we'll back you or not. We're backing you. I mean, we've sent hundreds of billions of dollars to the Ukraine. All we wanted was some kind of a token that we might get some of our money back at some point. That's it. You know, we're not a blank check. But trust me, and the Ukraine's not in NATO. You know, they had their chance to be in NATO, and they didn't do it. So, yeah. Anyway, that's why we don't have boots on the ground and everything else. If that happens to one of our NATO partners, trust me, we got your back 100%. The American people have your back 100%. The dumbest redneck in the dumbest part of the dumbest county in the dumbest city in the dumbest part of the United States has your back. Every person in America has your back. Trust me. This isn't, these aren't the same situations. So yes, we do think that you need to build your own military. Yes, we think all European countries should build their own military. The world needs to quit depending on the United States for everything. That is not the same as you being invaded, you being bombed, you being whatevered. We're there. We're there. Trust me.
Why? The sleeping giant of Germany is now wide awake to his ambitions, and it's doing something that Putin never thought possible. It's making a military comeback. Scratch that, Russia has pushed Germany into a full-blown revolution that means any war Putin wages against NATO will see him face off against a supremely powerful foe. Here's what Germany is doing to prepare for Russia, along with a future that should see it ascend to becoming one of Europe's most respected military powers once again. It all starts with spending, a lot of spending. On April 28th, Breaking Defense reported that all of Europe appears to be trending toward higher military spending than at any point over the last few decades. Germany is leading the charge. It's preparing to become the fourth largest defense spender in the entire world, putting it behind only the US, Russia, and China in terms of the money it's going to pour into its armed forces. The numbers are impressive. In 2024 alone, Germany spent $88.5 billion on defense. Interestingly, you can argue that Germany was still underspending that year. $88.5 billion accounted for 1.9% of Germany's GDP, placing its spending below the 2% of GDP spending recommended by NATO. However, that's actually bad news for Russia. It means that Germany still has plenty of room to grow, meaning we may see its military spending rocket up in the next few years. Even with that GDP limitation, the 2024 numbers represented a 28% increase over Germany's 2023 military spending.
Listen, you guys have serious military manufacturing. You know, HK is a serious company. And, you know, I don't know anything about tanks or anything else, but I mean, you got Mercedes-Benz, you got BMW, you got Audi, you got Volkswagen, you got all these companies. Clearly, you guys can you don't even have to buy from America or anything else. You know, clearly, you can do your own. You have Airbus, right? Isn't that German? So you have your own manufacturers. Glock, well, that's Austrian, but regardless, you've got all these manufacturers. You guys should be spending $200 billion right now, because guns don't go bad. Bombs don't go bad. So put the money in. You got the money. You've got one of the biggest economies in the world. Put the money in and then sit on it. You know, you can always go down. Put in $200 or $300 billion over the next, you know, for the next 2 or 3 years, and then scale it back to $100 billion every year after that, unless there's a conflict. Doesn't help you to start trying to build airplanes after war starts. It's not even reasonable to compare it to America, because we're just nuts. I mean, and we have so much waste that who knows. Obviously, you know, no one's ever going to touch our military, but there's no reason that you couldn't be the second largest spender. I guarantee, I would bet anything that Germany's economy is better than Russia's. You guys should be the number 2 spender, number 3 spender, maybe. I would go with number 2 for the next couple of years. Hey, I think a Google card just went by to map my neighborhood. In case you guys always wonder why I look to my right, it's where my security cameras are. Anyway, you should be number 2. Maybe only for a couple of years. Build it up and then get everything working right, get everything, you know, logistically correct and all that. I mean, $88 billion sounds like a lot, but it's not. I mean, we spend 12 times that, you know, and we already have the biggest military. No, you don't need to spend anywhere near what we spend, but you should be spending more than Russia, because Russia was already ahead of you. So if you want to try to catch up, you should have the best military in Europe. My opinion. Based on your economy. I mean, 3 submarines, come on. Come on now. I don't think you have any aircraft carriers. And you may not need any, I don't know. I don't know much about Navy, but you definitely need jets.
Along with an overall 89% rise since 2015. In other words, Germany has almost doubled the amount of cash it's dedicated to its armed forces over the last decade. This sudden surge in spending was bolstered by a $105 billion extra budgetary fund Germany established in 2022 when Putin launched his full-scale invasion.
There you go.
That fund was designed to lead to more spending up until 2024, allowing Germany to procure more weapons from its arms manufacturers and engage in new military research projects. The results of this spending are numerous. Over the last couple of years, Germany has been able to send over $14.3 billion in military aid to Ukraine, along with several billion more in humanitarian and financial aid. In terms of its own military, Germany has used these funds to spend heavily on 97 procurement and development projects since 2022. Those projects have resulted in the country reinforcing its stockpile of Leopard 2A8 main battle tanks and enabled the development of new U-212CD submarines. Add the purchases of more Patriot missiles for its aerial defenses and a renewed focus on 155mm artillery procurement, and you get a spending spree that will have Putin shaking in his boots. That spending alone might be enough to show you that Germany is committed to making a military comeback, but it's nothing compared to what 2025 and beyond have in store. In March, Germany's lawmakers voted for a historic increase in defense and infrastructure spending, unlike anything the country has seen before. This vote was massive. Approved by 2/3 of the country's parliament, the vote ruled to make defense and security spending exempt from Germany's strict debt rules that typically prevent it from raising its military budget.
There you
With
go.
those shackles removed, the country has created a $547 billion infrastructure budget that it plans to spend on strengthening both its military and the facilities that military needs to be effective in the European theater. Incoming German Chancellor Friedrich Merz commented at the time that the vote was the result of Germany realizing that it had felt a false sense of security over the past decade. The decision we are making today, Merz said, can be nothing less than the first major step towards a new European defense community. In other words, Germany isn't just spending to empower itself, it's doing it to strengthen the entire European resistance, including dedicating money to countries that aren't part of the European Union, that may soon face Putin's expansionist ambitions. Key among the features of the new law is the changing of the German debt brake. Previously, any defense spending Germany conducted was subject to a limit on borrowing that activated when that spending reached 0.35% of the country's GDP. Anything over had to come from Germany's funds, with no borrowing involved. Now, spending above 1% of GDP won't be subject to any borrowing limits, essentially meaning that Germany has just granted itself free rein to spend as much as it needs to when revolutionizing its armed forces. More than $500 billion committed to new spending initiatives is the result. And if all of that wasn't enough, Germany took another action in late April to show Putin that it's serious about countering the threat Russia poses to Europe. It triggered an EU emergency clause that allows the country to rapidly increase its spending without triggering any of the EU's spending rules. That move amounted to a second blockade being removed a little over a month after Germany removed its domestic spending restrictions. Under the EU emergency clause, Germany, along with other members of the EU, gains the ability to increase their spending by up to 1.5% of their GDP annually for the next 4 years. Germany has encouraged its EU partners to take advantage of that rule. It may have a tough time in some areas. While Germany isn't saddled with any debt, which is another reason why it can increase spending now, nations like Spain and Italy are in a more difficult position. Though such countries may not join Germany in boosting their spending, they'll still benefit from the country's dedication to revolutionizing its military. These aren't moves Germany is making solely for its own sake. They're moves that see it step up as the EU protector it was always supposed to be. Politico says that the triggering of this emergency clause means that Germany has the potential to go far beyond the $550 billion or so of spending to which it already committed after stripping away its domestic limitation. Merz has already agreed to a $1.13 trillion package of defense and infrastructure that relies on the EU's emergency clause. Don't underestimate how vital spending will be to Germany's military revival. It was already the world's fourth largest defense spender in 2024, regardless of the state of its equipment. Now we're seeing the country make moves that could put it closer to par with Russia and China when it comes to its military budgets. So Germany is finally putting its money where its mouth is when it comes to its military. But what does this mean in real terms? For one thing, the country is now engaged in a massive rearmament. We've already touched on this with the mentions of its purchases of new Leopard tanks, submarines, and artillery shells. Writing for Forbes in March, David Axe provided even more details. He says that along with the equipment already mentioned, Germany plans to spend big on new warships, radio and radar jammers, spy satellites, and even artificial intelligence. These last two are important because they show us that Germany isn't solely looking to increase the size of its military. The country also wants to modernize. With new satellites, it can keep more eyes on Putin, gather information that informs its own strategies, and can be shared with allies. The increasing use of artificial intelligence could allow for the development of new...
That's it. You need drones. Drones is the future. I think we're doing drone boats now. I don't know if they're called drones or not, but they are peopleless boats. Probably submarines too. The future is drones. I mean, you know, the human casualties, the price, you know, the price difference of a drone versus a jet, night and day. And we're working on, we've got this mesh communication system where like a jet, like an F-35 or an F-22 can fly and then have like 100 drones with it, and they're all talking to each other. So it's like a swarm. So you literally have 1 or 2 pilots and 100 aircraft doing whatever. It's crazy. That's the future. So if your kid's playing video games, it could be a pilot.
New automated drones and similar weapons that enable Germany to fight against Russia while putting fewer of its soldiers at risk. That isn't to say that Germany won't be focusing on low-tech spending. ACT says that the German military requires advanced technologies, many of which it procures from the United States. However, its most urgent needs are twofold: people and ammunition. We've already seen that the country intends to spend big on new artillery shells. We can also likely safely assume that spending will extend to everything from missiles, such as the new Patriot missiles it intends to buy, and even ammunition for its small arms. As for the people problem, that's another issue entirely. Germany currently has 180,000 active soldiers on its military payroll. It intends to boost that number by around 203,000 by 2031. That growth will allow Germany to create a military entrenchment in Lithuania, which is one of the 3 Baltic states that would stand on the front lines against Russia if Putin extends his ambitions beyond Ukraine and into NATO-led Europe. Again, it's here where we see Germany's commitment to increased spending come into play. According to Glassdoor, the average monthly pay for a German soldier is just shy of $3,190. Multiply that by 12 and you get an average annual salary of $38,280. If Germany intends to hire 20,000 new soldiers in the coming years, that leads to an outlay of around $765.6 million. The simple fact is that more people means more money spent. That's especially the case for a country that has so long placed military importance on the back burner. In addition to finding the money to hire new troops.
That's a good salary. 40 grand for, and then I assume that you don't have room and board or food. 40 grand's a good salary for a soldier. You know, that's, you know, an officer's going to make 1.5 or 2 times as much. That's good pay. But it adds up for sure. If you're adding 200,000 people at 40 grand a piece, that's billions and billions and billions. But it's also good for your economy. Unemployment goes down, etc., etc.
Around $765.6 million. The simple fact is that more people means more money spent. That's especially the case for a country that has so long placed military importance on the back burner. In addition to finding the money to hire new troops, which its latest defense spending commitments should ensure, Germany also has to come up with ways to make careers in its military seem more attractive as part of a renewed recruitment drive. That may involve bumping up soldier pay substantially, especially given that the average salary in Germany was over $58,800 at the end of 2024. Right now, there's not a lot of incentive for the average German.
Yeah, hold on a second. You can't compare a soldier to a businessman with a degree. You know, my guess is the average annual salary of 60,000 in Germany is probably 75% with a college degree. They're 35 years old on average, 40 years old. You know, people going into becoming a soldier are anywhere between 18 and 26 usually. So you got a whole different demographic. It's not really reasonable. 40 grand for a soldier who doesn't have to pay rent. What's rent? What's the average rent in Germany? That's got to be 1,500 a month. That's 20,000 a year. So now your average annual salary is 38,000 if you're paying rent and food. Our military is rent-free and all the food you can eat. So I'm assuming Germany would be the same. Just you have food, you have medical, dental, you got, and then rent. I mean, that's medical, dental, rent, all that is $25,000 a year minimum. Minimum. So add that on to your 38,000. I mean, if you want to bump it up, great, bump it up. But you don't have to go nuts. You don't have to increase it $10,000 or $20,000. What you do is sign-on bonuses, one-time shots, $5,000, some spending money. You don't have to bump up their annual salary $10,000. You just give them a $5,000 or $10,000 signing bonus. They get $1,000 a month for the first year, whatever. You can't compare the annual salary of a white-collar executive to a 19-year-old soldier. It's just not reasonable.
German to become a soldier. Germany may need to counter this by offering more money, which could easily mean that its outlay for 20,000 new soldiers grows beyond $1 billion, plus the money it would have to spend to deliver raises to its existing 180,000 soldiers. We may see Germany offer pay increases soon, now that it has a much higher military budget. For now, the country is coming up with other ways to bolster its personnel as it prepares for a potential fight with Russia. For instance, November 2024 saw the German army introduce new measures that allowed it to collect data on military-aged people in the country. Those measures were accompanied by the proposed creation of a new volunteer military service, lasting between 6 and 23 months. That could provide the country with a steady supply of reservists. Those reserves could prove vital in a war against Russia. As we've seen in Ukraine, Putin prefers attritional strategies that see him throw superior manpower at his enemies to grind out wins. Assuming he employed a similar strategy against Germany, the Bundeswehr needs to have more people to hold Russia's human waves at bay. Germany accepted its military's proposals in November, with its first step being the publishing of a questionnaire delivered to all 18-year-olds that will assess their desire to join the Bundeswehr. Germany's ultimate goal is to amass 200,000 reservists, 140,000 more than the 60,000 it currently has, to go along with its 20,000 new active recruits. That would give it a potential military force of around 400,000 if it has to go to war. So the German military's people problem hasn't been solved, but the country is working on it as part of its revolution. Beyond these measures, the country has ratified the previously mentioned agreement with Lithuania, which will see it station 5,000 soldiers in the Baltic state. Germany's Hessen frigate was also sent on a mission to the Red Sea in 2024, where it became the first German naval asset to fire live rounds in modern Germany's history. These may seem like small steps, but they all contribute to the military buildup and preparations Germany is undergoing to prepare itself for Russia. Oh, and the country is doing all of this while continuing its extensive support of Ukraine. Toward the end of April, Chancellor Merz appointed former banker and pro-Ukrainian politician Johann Vadapol as his country's foreign minister. That was another statement sent to Putin. With Vadapol, Germany has a minister who's going to push for more donations and support sent to Ukraine. Vadapol is also a minister who believes expansionism is on Putin's mind. Speaking to Germany's FAZ newspaper, he says that the Ukraine war is not about a few square kilometers in Ukraine, but rather the fundamental question of whether we will allow a classic war of conquest in Europe. The cynical among you may point out that the last European power to engage in such a classic war of conquest was Germany itself. However, it may be that fact that makes Germany's military revival so important. It sees the signs of the very expansionism it engaged in back in the 1940s. With its comeback, it aims to both stymie such an expansion before it truly starts and ensure it's on the right side of history as it does. Ultimately, this combination of actions can only mean one thing for Putin. He now has to deal with a Germany that's fast evolving from a European laughingstock into potentially the best bet that Europe has at defending against Russia if Putin moves beyond Ukraine. Germany today is not the Germany of 2022. It's removed its shackles and is dedicated to becoming a major military force once again. Only this time, it's doing it while working alongside its allies in NATO and Europe to send a distinct message to Putin. If you invade, Germany will be ready.
Well, there you go, guys. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. You know, it's not about being pro-war. It's about deterring a war. You know, America gets a lot of flack for the size of our military and the battles we're always in. We're trying to do the right thing most of the time, at least. You know, we're trying to help people that can't help themselves. We're trying to prevent things from happening. If you look at any of the wars that we've been in, we don't take anything from them. We could have taken land in the Middle East and gotten all that oil and everything else. We spend billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars on battles and wars and whatever else you want to call them, police actions, whatever. We don't do it to conquer people. We don't do it to take things from people. We do it as a show of force and to stop aggression from other people. And trust me when I tell you this. I'm no expert, but Putin doesn't want any part of the United States. He may be someone who doesn't always act in the best interest of his people or other people. He's not an idiot. He's very smart. And he knows America's not the one you go against. So it looks like Germany is going to be in that category. You know, it's easy to pick on the little guy. It's not so easy when you've got a fair chance of losing. And this whole thing with Ukraine has really pulled some blinds back off of Russia, and they're not quite the powerhouse everyone assumed they were. I mean, their economy is in shambles, and it has been for years. So you got poor people and billionaires. That's all you got. So it makes perfect sense that the military's not up to snuff. Plus, they can't pay them well. Plus, they can't give them proper equipment. I mean, there's no drive. You know, one thing you can say about American soldiers is you know, they're not drafted. They're not forced to join. It is a voluntary military. And we are the most professionally highest trained military in the world because our guys have the will to fight for what's right and to fight for their brothers. And that's what you're not seeing in the war. That's what the advantage Ukraine has. You know, when 60 Ukrainians make 180 Russians surrender, that's all will. That's all drive. So anyway, I'm glad to hear it. I hope you guys invest a ton. Like I said, the stuff doesn't go bad. Just get it while you can. You know, get it before you need it. You don't have to have the most space age fighter jets on the world and all that. Build up your ammunition, build up your tanks, build up, you know, the normal stuff. You don't have to finance research and development projects and all that. Stick with what works. Buy it from us. We got plenty to sell. All right, that's all I got for you guys today. I appreciate all of you, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Thanks for checking out my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Can you believe that we now have over 1,000 subscribers and over 100 videos in our YouTube library? Me neither. It's been less than a year, and this channel has grown so rapidly. What's more important than the number of subscribers is the quality of subscribers. Our subscribers are knowledgeable and generous with their time. They teach us about their country and their culture from their firsthand experiences. See, over 95% of my subscribers live outside of the United States. So we're getting information firsthand. If you haven't subscribed already, hit that button. I think you'll enjoy it and it doesn't cost you anything. If you'd like to see other videos similar to this one on the same country, click here. If you'd like to see some videos on some other countries in Europe, click there. Want to see some of the most beautiful castles and cathedrals in the world? They're over here. Want to check out the United States? We're down here. I appreciate you, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.